Alright, we made it to episode, what episode is this? Episode 4. And today we have a special guest. So perhaps you can introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dionne from Mechanical Engineering. I'm year 1 taking this mod as my GET.
Fantastic. And everybody is supposed to know who is Hui-chieh and Yong by now already. So what's our agenda today, Yong?
Prof, our agenda today will be to discuss the quiz results, so how quizzes have been in general, and get our guest here to share. So what was the experience like attempting the quiz and some struggles that she faced?
Were there a lot of struggles, Dionne?
The first quiz was the hardest for me. Then I felt like the second and third quiz got better. Like it got more straightforward. Or maybe because I started to understand what the quizzes, like what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But I also feel like a lot of times when I listen to lectures and everything, like I think that I get what is happening. Like I grasp the concept already. But then when you look at the quiz, it's like it changes the ball game, and I feel like I actually don't know what I'm doing.
That's a really, really perceptive observation, by the way. I wouldn't say it's intended, but it's expected. We know that that's going to happen. I'm making sense in the lectures, otherwise I'm not doing my job. But it does mean that there are going to be a lot of students who think that they understood after the lectures. This is a well-known effect actually in psychology or education. So that's the reason why the second week is very important, where we basically drill you all through the quizzes, right, to make sure that you all actually understand. I don't know whether Hui-chieh will have similar experiences in your NUS.
Actually, for me, no. When I was in my first philosophy class onwards, we just wrote essays for every single class. So there was absolutely no quiz version. So that's why when I came here, I learned about this format. I thought it was really interesting.
I wasn't thinking of the quizzes. I was actually thinking, along the lines of what Dionne was saying. The idea that you heard the lecture, you thought you understood until you really sat down and tried to do something with it. Right? I don't know whether Hui-chieh and Yong you all had experiences like that in the past before also.
Prof, yes, actually, and that kind of experience is not limited to just doing quizzes, but sometimes, when you're writing an essay, right, you think you understand what the author is saying. A part of the essay will be dedicated to summarizing the author's argument. And then sometimes, when I try to summarize what I read, I just realized that I don't make sense. And after that, I worried, is it because I don't understand the author, or is it really because you really don't make sense? And then, I panic. Yeah, so yeah.
Typically, a lecture cannot cover every single thing that is meant to be covered in the text. So usually the text that you read, there are a lot of arguments, a lot of different objections, a lot of replies, and so the lecture cannot cover everything. Then there will often be the case where there are some parts where they're not covered in lecture and but are important to maybe reinforcing the author's main argument that I missed when I was reading my reading.
But what Dionne is pointing to is, in a way, an even more fundamental thing, right? So what Hui-chieh is saying actually is a very real thing, in a sense that obviously we don't try to cover everything, but if you think about it, you can distinguish between case where we don't cover everything and then there are some other things you need to chase down. There's also a case of we did cover it, but do you really understand it? So it may not be as straightforward to understand as it may appear at first sight, right? Yeah, I don't know, Dionne, maybe you can say a bit more about what you mean when you said that when you were trying the quizzes, then you realize that the whole ballgame changes.
When you do the quiz, then you choose your answers already based on whatever you learned in lectures, and then maybe you look at discussion that is going on, you hear what people say and their objections to your answer make sense. Then you start to question which one is the right answer, what is the concept, what is the question trying to teach or trying to test. You think that maybe the concept that the quiz is testing you understand, but then when the quiz results are out, you realize that understanding wasn't there. That's why when you get the objections, you also don't understand that that's how the concept should be applied.
Very perceptive, by the way. I think that many of you are encountering this, which will be a good thing. A quick note about the quiz scores. Yeah, it's been going up. You know that we have gone from just below 4 average to just above 6 average now across the span of 3 quizzes. It's actually quite impressive, and I'm very sure that you will continue to go up. Were the MRQs any harder to do than the MCQs?
I think the MRQs are harder. MCQs, some of them is the 2 only, 1 or 2, 1 and 2 only, those. So it's sort of MRQ, but it's in MCQ format. Because let's say my option would have been 2 only, but there isn't even a 2 2 only. So it's like I would know like, oh no, I'm like there's something wrong with my answer. But then for the MRQ, I wouldn't know. I would just think that I'm correct.
That's right. In a MCQ, you do have the advantage of knowing that it's really just one of these 4. That means that we can actually use the format of the MCQ to teach you a few things. You may think that it's one of them, but then you realize that because of the fact that you cannot pick, there is no option that says that, then you in fact end up learning something. But it's a very tricky thing because we're not there to make sure that you actually did learn it. MRQs are tougher in the sense that you don't have that clutch anymore, but they don't also build in that degree of teachability, so to speak. It's a trade-off. We can't have everything, Yong, were the MRQs, do you all feel that it was tougher?
Prof, so when we have the MRQ, right, first thing we have to check is whether the options are mutually exclusive. And usually when that is the case, right, we already feel that the question is quite hard already. I have been placed in a few student Telegram groups, right? So I actually observe how students discuss the quiz questions and what is their thinking process. A few students I observe they have this tendency to just rule out a particular option, right? Just because they think it's wrong, and they think this one is so implausible, so I don't have to entertain some other options because it's grouped together in MCQ. Right? In some sense, the student is not really on his toes. It's not really on his toes. He can kind of slack a little bit. That's not a bad thing, because I mean, if all 8 questions are so difficult, then cut them some slack. Right? But I feel that sometimes when I see students think like this, right? Because I'm the one who actually created the options. From my perspective, I want them to think about why the option is not the answer. When they think like this, then I wasted my effort to come up with that option.
Okay, just to be clear about this to everyone, the tutors do help me draft the questions, but in a way I had to sign off on all of them. Don't blame them for everything. It's okay, I can take some of them. But Yong brings up an important point of discussion, right? So Dionne, actually I'm curious, how do you normally approach one of these questions? What is the thinking process like, both for yourself and if you try to discuss with other friends, how do you go about doing this? Do you keep a log, for instance? Yeah.
Basically, I did badly for the first. So I just look at the question and then I just think based on the concept that is being taught, which answer is most suitable. But then from quiz 2 onwards, basically I don't have anyone to talk to. Then there is this GET group chat with a lot of people inside. So there are people discussing inside and it's very awkward to talk in the group. But there was one instance when this person was arguing about how his answer is correct and I was quite sure that his answer was wrong. So I went to private message the person and discuss why I thought his answer was wrong. I sort of made a friend through that. The way he's been approaching the questions is that he will keep a log of each option. Why is it right? Why is it wrong? After everything, he will check with the quiz debrief. Doing this method is better for me also. Not just to get the right answer, but to actually understand what the concepts are.
Yeah, that's a really important point. That's the advice I've been giving to a lot of students. Keep a log of your reasoning. If you rule out a particular option, it has to be because you thought through it and you come to the conclusion that it is wrong. That means that technically for every one of the options, there is a reasoning involved. None of the options typically will be so straightforward that you can just rule it out by right. I mean, sometimes we may go crazy or should I say maybe we are just lazy and we just throw in one of the funny options just to make sure that we have 4 options. But it doesn't really happen all that often nowadays. So keeping the log is important and comparing it against the published debrief is also important. And it's also a basis for if you think that maybe there was an ambiguity that we missed, that the question setter has missed. That's how people email us with long emails to tell us that, can I make a case of option C instead? And then they'll argue. And we look at them very carefully. We don't just brush them aside. If the students really hits upon the reasoning that is correct, that points to a hidden ambiguity that we didn't focus enough on, no, the correct thing to do is to give people the points and just make sure we do it in a principled way. That's it. Everybody who selected that should get the point also. I think it's much better for learning this way. But don't you find that doing it this way is also kind of cumbersome because you have to keep a log and you have to remember all this? Do you feel as if we are asking too much? It's only 8 questions though.
I think it's not that much compared to all the other mods already. For me, because this is my only arts module, I hear from all my other FASS friends telling me it's very shag to cause a lot of readings.
Some people have told me in the past that our module is kind of light in terms of the work, and I was a little bit surprised to hear that. But when I probed deeper, what the person meant was that we don't have a lot of readings. Which is true, we don't have a lot of readings. But then the person actually spends several hours every week working on the quizzes. So there you have it. So I told him, yeah, that's where the work is. What are you talking about? So when you think about the design of this module, the weight is actually being carried by the quiz, right? Or the things surrounding the quiz, so to speak, not just the quiz itself. So that brings me to what you said about you made a friend through the Telegram chat. That's a cool story, actually.
That's my only friend now.
Yeah. Wow. Let's hope that, who knows, maybe after this, people are asking to try and talk to you. I'm actually curious about the perceived value of discussions with peers, right? Do you feel as if that will help you? Or do you feel as if it has helped you?
I think that it definitely has helped. During like tutorial, when you hear all your like tutorial mates discussing it, like they make a lot of valid points. Because they make so many valid points like regarding like the objections and all that, it like sort of tests like your understanding. Some people in my tutorial, like they come up with a lot of weird scenarios, and every time they come up with weird scenarios, it makes you think further.
Here's one way to think about what all these additional people are here for, right? So when I first thought about how to design the quizzes, the first thought that came to mind was this: I cannot be there all the time. There are so many of you, so each person's face time with me is actually quite limited. And even if you include all the tutors, it's actually very, very limited face time. So that's one data point. The second data point, but we know that when people encounter other people who are in a position to test them, their understanding improves, right? So how do I sort of make use of the second fact to overcome the problem faced by the first fact? And we realize that encouraging students to discuss with each other, to test each other, is actually the easiest way. Because then you will encounter new possibilities that we didn't have a chance to test you on, simply because we just don't have the same kind of FaceTime with you. We can't be there all the time. Do you feel that it's valuable if your discussion mates disagree with you?
Yeah, I think you learn more when they disagree with you than when they agree with you. When they agree with you, they are like reasoning is very similar to yours. It's like you're not really like thinking of new perspectives to the issue at hand. When they disagree, you're trying to see from their point of view, like, oh, why my opinion wrong, or in the sense like it's not in line with theirs.
Prof, it's also more exciting when they disagree, right? Because only one person can be correct. So
Spoken like a real philosophy major, you are terrible. Are the philo majors in UNUS like that also, Hui-chieh, when you were there?
Well, I like to say to my students that like we're not interested in like winning the argument. We're interested in finding the truth. More often than not, you'll be wrong, and it's a skill to like admit that you're wrong when you're wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's a very nice passage in Plato about this. I don't know whether Yong will remember. Socrates was saying that I gain the most when other people refute me, because that I really learned something. Because if they don't refute me, then I really knew it, right? You haven't changed my mind, so it's not as if I learned anything new. That's a really, really nice way to think about it, actually. Yeah, but it's not easy, as everybody will agree. Dionne, if we ask you for, maybe wish list is too strong a word, how do you think the experience can be improved from the point of view of learning, or from the point of view of just like, so it's not so shag?
I feel like I'm very confused about how to think. I don't know how to explain this, but it's like following what is happening, but I feel like I'm not learning because I'm not thinking in the certain way like that this field requires me to think. That make any sense?
Yeah, you do. The catch here, of course, is that to a certain degree, what we're trying to teach is not a specialized thinking skill. But nonetheless, there is something unnatural about it, because strict thinking is actually a bit unnatural. Wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Do you feel as if what we are doing is a little bit more like math and physics? How does it compare, actually? Now I'm really curious.
Math and physics is very logical. It's like there's only one correct answer, but when it comes to philosophy, it's like you must think of many different like aspects. I feel like I cannot foresee the amount of objections to a certain opinion. It's like there's always no end to it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, but we're not testing people on that kind of stuff when you think about it, because okay, go ahead, please. Yeah.
But the thing is, you must learn how to think such that you can know what are the arguments that would come up.
So there is a certain conundrum of open-endedness. At least the open-ended thinking is needed if you want to sort of be able to do this well, right? Because even in MCQ, even though technically there's only one correct answer, if you don't have that kind of readiness to consider different possibilities, you're not going to be able to find the one correct answer even.
I feel like for the MCQs, I mean for the quiz in general, there are sometimes when you think the answer is wrong because like you never thought of a weird scenario where this is possible. So I feel like this module requires me to have like that kind of thinking, very different from math and physics.
This is very interesting because I wouldn't have quite put things this way, but I think you're giving me new ideas, right? So at a certain level, because we're asking MCQ and MRQ questions where they are objectively correct answers, and after all, we're checking to see whether you understood the things that we talked about. We're not even asking you whether they are right or wrong. We're not asking you whether Norcross is right or wrong, or Singer is right or wrong. We're asking you, if this is what Norcross is saying, then what things follows, whether or not these things are compatible. We're testing on those kinds of connections. And but what you're saying is that even though that's all we are testing, in a sense, in order for you to do this properly in philosophy, you still need to be able to have that kind of imagination where you consider all the other possibilities. I didn't quite think of things that way actually until you say that. I probably should chase it down. I feel like this is something that's worth looking into more closely. Okay, hey, thanks so much, Dionne, for coming on to tell us about your experience. I'll give you the last few minutes to tell us anything more you want to say, because there's another group of people coming on very soon.
I don't have anything else to say. Thank you.
So I hope that
Bye-bye.
I hope that you're at least doing okay in the module. Everything else considered.
I'm suffering, but I think I'm suffering less.
So don't forget to check in with the tutors and all that when you all have questions and all that. Thanks so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on to the podcast. Hope to catch you again another time.
Okay, see you.
Okay, all the best.